What's going on, everybody? Good morning. We have made it to yet another Friday. Another Friday in the books as we move towards this pretty much dead portion of the off season where we just kind of sit around and wait for beat reporters to tell us something interesting about training camp. And I want to take this opportunity to talk about a little bit of a story that has been building over the past couple of weeks. It's one of those things that a little bit more gets added to it every week or so, it feels like. I'm talking about Byron Murphy and the disrespect or the perceived disrespect. So, Byron Murphy, number 16 overall pick by the Seattle Seahawks in the most recent draft. Now, before I say anything, most of you guys know I was not as enamored with Byron Murphy as a lot of you guys. If you are watching this video, you probably like Byron Murphy a little bit more than I do. I've said it before, I think he's going to be a good player. I think he's going to be a player that we do not regret having. I think it will be a pick that we end up not regretting, not that we will not regret making. I just don't see the superstar potential the way some people seem to, but there's nothing wrong with that. And that being said, there does seem to be, and I support this, by the way, of course, because I think it can have a very positive effect. There does seem to be a bit of a building chip on the shoulder of Byron Murphy, if you guys know what I mean. If you've been paying attention the last few weeks, you probably do, because he has been in some perceived ways disrespected, and I want to ask people what they think about this. Do you guys think any of this is fair? So, to run it down, several weeks ago, the NFL had their annual rookie premiere event where they invite a bunch of the top rookies, and they invited a bunch of quarterbacks, obviously. They invited really mostly offensive players. But they invited quite a few players, and Byron Murphy was not among them. Byron Murphy was not invited to the rookie premiere showcase. So that was the first thing that made people go, hey, wait a minute here. This guy went 16th overall. He was the second defensive player taken. You don't want him on your rookie premiere showcase? So there was that. Then we had the defensive rookie of the year odds coming out, where he wasn't even in the top 5 in terms of odds of winning defensive rookie of the year, which is a little bit weird when he was a number 2 overall defensive player. And a little bit ago, and this is a minor thing in the grand scheme of things, I understand that, and I don't think people are really so much upset about this one, because I think it's understandable, and I think a lot of people also see it that way, but ESPN released their projected top rookies in various stats, like touchdowns, passing yards, interceptions, and sacks. And sacks are what I have on screen here. And as you can see here, they list out 5 guys that they think will lead the rookie class in sacks, Byron Murphy not being among them. And this is all kind of added up to where there seems to be some disrespect being paid to Byron Murphy. And I can definitely see a bit of it. And this is coming from me, somebody who does not think that Byron Murphy is going to be Aaron Donald, who does not think he's going to be Jalen Carter, who does not think he's going to be some future 10-time All-Pro, who does not think that he's going to go out there and immediately have a double-digit sack season. So, to start with the rookie premiere thing, the rookie premiere showcase, I do think that's odd. I understand that he's a lineman, and those guys are not as fun and not as big a draw as the skill position players, like offensive players, receivers, quarterbacks, running backs. Even on the defense, you have guys like cornerbacks that tend to be a little bit more, they tend to get your attention a little bit more. But the guy goes in the top half of the first round of the draft. He's the second defensive player taken. He was a relatively prolific player in college football, considered by most to be the best defensive lineman in the country last year, and you don't even invite him to your event. It's a little bit suspect, yeah. That part I can buy in on. But let's take a look at some things that are a little more concrete, because that's just whatever. That's just them trying to invite the guys that are going to get them the most attention, and they I think, reasonably concluded that somebody like a Byron Murphy would not get a ton of attention because he is a lineman and he's not the kind of guy who's going to be like an Aaron Donald type. Again, I want to stress that because I know that's the comp that people are pushing, but I really, really think that it's unrealistic and unreasonable to project that. So, okay, I kind of get it. I certainly would have had him on the list though. So, Defensive Rookie of the Year. So, I got this page from sportsbettingdime.com. They list out the odds of Defensive Rookie of the Year on 3 different sites. What is this? DraftKings, FanDuel, and I think this is just the MGM. So, you can see that Murphy is currently number 6. Turner is the far and away well, not far and away, but a significant favorite. Latu is right behind him. And then there's a big drop off. You've got Jared Verse, Terrion Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell, and then you've got Byron Murphy. So not even being in the top 5 is definitely something that people have taken note of. And there does seem to be, he's even aware of it. Byron Murphy is even aware of the fact that he's getting a little, you could even call it a little bit of shade, I guess. You could call it a little bit of like, I'm the second defensive player taken in the draft, and yet here we are. We've got guys that went after me, like Dallas Turner, like Jared Verse, like Quinyon Mitchell, who just they're considered to be more likely to be impact rookies than me. So here's my thing here, right? The odds makers, their job is not to be respectful to people just because of how good of players they are. Their job is to correctly estimate what the odds are of somebody winning defensive rookie of the year is. And the reality is, if you are an edge rusher who is getting a lot of sacks, like Turner, like Latu, like Verse could all be, or you're a cornerback who might get a lot of interceptions, which is the case for Terrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell, you are going to make more highlight reel plays. You are going to make more monster plays. So these guys are splashier. These guys get more attention. These guys put up stats that can easily be translated by anybody. So those guys are going to get the Defensive Rookie of the Year consideration way more than a guy like a Byron Murphy. Like, if you look at the history of Defensive Rookie of the Year, let me see if I can zoom in. Okay, yeah, we can zoom in a little bit here. Will Anderson, edge rusher. Sauce Gardner, cornerback. Micah Parsons, basically an edge rusher. I know he played a lot of linebacker too, but it was the edge rushing stuff that got people's attention. Chase Young, edge rusher. Nick Bosa, edge rusher. Shaq Leonard, off-ball linebacker. You go through the list here, and you see mostly guys that play those positions that put up big stats. And most of the time when you find a guy like, for instance, Aaron Donald, who plays a position that typically doesn't get the monster stats, Aaron Donald actually did. Aaron Donald had 9.5 sacks as a 9.5 sacks as a rookie. So he overcame the limitations of his position, so of course he's going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. If you want to find a comp for Byron Murphy, a player like Byron Murphy winning Defensive Rookie of the Year, I can only really find 2. One was Sheldon Richardson. He won Defensive Rookie of the Year for the Jets in 2013. He didn't have monster numbers, but he was a good player. It was a little bit of a down year. It was a little bit of a weaker year for defensive rookies, and they decided to give it to Sheldon Richardson. And then I went back to, what year was it? 1994, Tim Bowens of the Miami Dolphins. He was a interior defensive lineman who did not put up monster numbers at all. He did have pretty good tackle numbers, so there's that, but he had like 3 or 4 sacks that year. So there was definitely there's a little bit of a track record of players like this getting Defensive Rookie of the Year. But for the most part, you look at these guys, they're the guys that put up the box score stats, the sacks, the tackles, the interceptions. They're not really so much the guys who set up everybody else. They're not the guys who occupy a lot of attention in the middle so that other players can go make plays. And that's a big part of what Byron Murphy's going to be. Like, if you think that Byron Murphy's going to go out there and get double-digit sacks as a rookie, I think you need to pull back a little bit because you're setting up unrealistic expectations for a player who just got here and showed you at Texas the kind of player that he is. Not necessarily the kind of player who's going to go out there and just wreck the quarterback every week. He's one of his big values as a player is the attention he occupies, the disruption more so than the actual play being made at the end. But yeah, you go down the list here, like you'll see a guy like Sue. Sue had, I think, 10 sacks as a rookie. So he was built differently at the end of the day. So a lot of off-ball linebackers and edge rushers in this collection as well. You can find the occasional cornerback. Charles Woodson's a good one. You've got Brian Urlacher, of course. Hugh Douglas had double-digit sacks as a rookie. So what I'm going to say about this is that Byron Murphy doesn't fit the archetype of the kind of player that wins Defensive Rookie of the Year. That goes to a player who gets a lot of attention on highlight reels. Highlight reels are things like sacks, interceptions, tackles for loss. They're not so much occupying attention in the middle. So this I completely understand, and I think people need to read this the right way. Vegas, which is, encompasses all of these betting sites, DraftKings, FanDuel, MGM, BetMGM, Bet365, whatever, they need to get it right. And if Byron Murphy's unlikely to win Defensive Rookie of the Year because you can clearly see he doesn't fit the archetype, then they have to put their odds in that context. And then as for the ESPN thing, where they projected how many sacks they think some of the top rookies are going to get, they went 5.4 Latu, 5.2 Darius Robinson, 4.9 Jared Verse, 4.5 Braylon Trice, and 4.2 for Dallas Turner. So obviously this is a product of the teammates that the player has. Like, I'm sure ESPN thinks Dallas Turner is a better player than Latu, but because Dallas Turner is sharing a team with some other prolific edge rushers, they're going to eat into his snaps, whereas Latu is somebody who has a little bit more of a free run to a big snap count. And also, he's more experienced. He has more NFL-ready skills, whereas Dallas Turner's a little bit more of a project. So you can see that this isn't just, oh, these are the guys we think are the best. These are the guys we think are going to play the most and have the most opportunities as well. I seriously doubt ESPN thinks Darius Robinson is better than Dallas Turner, but in this context, they have him a little bit higher. Now, let me be clear here. Byron Murphy is probably going to start for the Seahawks, or in a sense of the word, he's going to start, right? Because I imagine if we're running 3 down linemen, it's going to be a nose tackle in the middle, Leo on one side, and Murphy on the other side. So there are going to be opportunities for Murphy, but again, we have to consider the context here. This is just about sack totals, and I know there were some people who were not happy that Murphy wasn't here, but even in college, Murphy was not a big sack guy. Murphy was a pressure guy. His best year, he had 5 sacks. He played 14 games for Texas last year. Really, really good team, by the way, that gave him a lot of opportunities to get after the quarterback, and he wasn't necessarily somebody who made a ton of plays. 5 sacks, and that's in college. That's playing a lot of substandard teams that he's not going to get to play in the NFL. So that's just not his game. So I look at this and I think that's reasonable. If you read between the lines, they would probably say that Byron Murphy projects to get somewhere between 3 to 4 sacks this year as a rookie. That's pretty reasonable. That's probably the kind of player we are dealing with here. That's probably a fair and reasonable expectation for a guy who showed in college that he wasn't necessarily a big finisher. He's somebody who sets things up for other players. And those players are never going to get the mass credibility and the mass publicity of the players that do actually finish and do make plays. I mean, the only thing that might change for him this year in Seattle is that he won't be playing nose tackle nearly as much as he did at Texas. But I think his snap count will probably still be limited. And if he only ends up playing like even 35 snaps a game, that's going to be a significant difference compared to a lot of these edge players, some of whom are going to get to play more than that. Like, if you're Latu, you're probably going to get a significant chunk of playing time. The Colts have what? Quiddy Pay, right? He's good, but other than that, Latu could easily take that other edge starting role and basically be an every down player from day one. And he showed in college he is a finisher. Whatever you want to say about Latu as a player, he is a finisher. Monster sack production over the last 2 years compared to Murphy, who in 3 years, I know that the first year barely counts, but over the last 2 years, then you could say he's got 6 sacks. So that's my perspective on it. Again, these guys are not saying how good these players are going to be. Like, these betting odds, this is not Vegas, this is not these odd setters saying that Byron Murphy's not going to be as good as these guys. Now, I personally would agree that I do think that Dallas Turner has a higher ceiling than Byron Murphy. I do think that Quinion Mitchell does too. I love Quinion Mitchell. But regardless, that's not what Vegas is saying here. That's they're just trying to set up what they think is most likely to happen. Their job is to make money here. So I think this is totally understandable once you break it down. Honestly, being sixth is pretty reasonable. Like, they put him above Chop Robinson. And Chop Robinson's an edge rusher. That's a guy who could absolutely put up 8+ sacks this year. Cooper DeJean for the Eagles. He's playing on that that team with that pretty stacked defensive line. What if he comes away with 5 or 6 interceptions because a bunch of balls just get tossed up from the pass rush and he's just there to get it? Like, I don't think this is unfair at all. And ESPN's sack projection, I actually think makes a lot of sense. Notice that all the players they picked in the top 5 are edge rushers. There's a reason. That's not just randomness. That's because edge rushers get the big sack numbers most of the time. Now, the rookie showcase thing, that I don't really understand. You can at least invite the dude, but yeah, that's really what I wanted to say about this. I wanted to talk about this a little bit because I know this is something that's building up steam. At the end of the day, my ultimate take on this is I would much rather have these things happen to get Byron Murphy to have a chip on his shoulder than have them not happen. I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, this kind of thing happening is better for us than Murphy getting all this positive attention before he plays. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks.